actually changing very rapidly and radically at the grassroots level. I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Creative Schools, trying to document some of these changes.
So tell us some of those stories, because I think people really really want to see that happen.
Let me just give you one quick example. There's a school in the UK, up in the north of England, that I was reading about recently. It's called Feversham. It has a very high population of kids from different cultural backgrounds, a lot of them non-English speakers. And for a long time, it was a school not doing well. There's a pretty draconian system in the UK, as there is here in America, of testing and testing and testing. A big pressure on the STEM disciplines, and this school was not doing well. They have a head teacher there now who decided to tackle this from a different perspective. He introduced into the school a very broad program of music and drama courses. It's an elementary school, and they're doing about 5 hours a week of these different disciplines. And in a very short amount of time, the result has been that attendance at the school has rocketed, parental satisfaction has increased enormously. Kids are doing well, not just in those disciplines, but across the board. There was a school called Orchard Gardens in Massachusetts, which had the same effect. I was looking at this school a while back. It went through, I think, 5 principals in 6 years. It was a school nobody wanted to send their kid to. And the school was spending about $250,000 a year on security. It's an elementary school, security. They had a new head teacher come in, and he decided that the way forward was to get rid of all that. He dismissed all the security staff and invested all the money into cultural programs at the school. He sacked and brought in some new staff. They came up with an entirely new ethos. The school's flourishing. Now, there are arts examples, but if you look at a well-known example in California, there's a group of schools called High Tech High. These are schools which are secondary schools, high schools. All their work there is project-based. They don't have formal bells ringing. They don't have formal timetables in the school where kids have to move every 40 minutes. It's a lot of it's teamwork, collaborative work. They do high-level science and technology, and they also, by the way, have good arts programs in the schools, just as these other schools I mentioned also have good mathematics and science programs. What's common to them is that they have a very flexible approach to the timetable. They recognize that the key to all this is not just the curriculum, but it's pedagogy, and that they understand.
Explain what you mean by that.
I mean that there are, if you think of it, there are sort of 4 major elements to education, to a school, particularly school-based education. There's the curriculum, which is what we want people to learn. There's pedagogy, which is how we help people do it. And there's assessment, which is the process of making judgments for how well kids are getting on. And then there's the environment of the school in which all this takes place, the physical and the social environment in which it happens. Now, most countries in the world over the past 20 years have been trying to raise standards in education. In America, since the legislation No Child Left Behind, states and the federal government collectively have spent billions of dollars on standardized testing, particularly to try and raise standards in mathematics and languages and in science. And it's been a total waste of money, time, and effort.
You'd have said at the time that going that route isn't the way.
No.
To kids aren't machines. You can't just dial up the gauge and demand a higher level of results and expect to see it happen that way. That the key is what it's taking a more personalized approach of understanding that every kid is different and trying to build that into the system.
Well, the focus of these reform movements has been on curriculum and assessment. The effect has been to narrow the curriculum onto a group of disciplines that politicians have thought to be more useful, particularly for economic growth and development, and on assessment, which they have taken to be the way of guaranteeing that the standards are being delivered. And the form of assessment that's been followed has been a very narrow, normative, competitive form of assessment. And none of it's worked. The reason is that the curriculum has become too narrow. It's the wrong form of assessment, but also what really makes a difference in student achievement, what really makes the difference is pedagogy. It's the quality of teaching and learning. If you think back to your own time at school, certain teachers jump out at you in your memory, the ones who turned you on, the ones who turned you off. Teaching is an art form, and what it's been reduced to is a sort of delivery system, a kind of service agent for the testing companies. And that's not true of the schools I'm talking about. The ones that have been turned around have recognized that at the heart of a school is this idea of a learning community. And a learning community works best when students and teachers are working together collaboratively. People learn best when they learn with and from each other. So getting those conditions right, and the impact of a narrow curriculum and of this harsh culture of standardized tests is to kill off those conditions. It's why it doesn't work.
Help me understand this, because as someone who's, I mean, I'm outside education, but I'm interested in technology. Obviously, in the last 20 years, there's been this spectacular revolution, this thing called the internet. Suddenly, everyone in the developed world, pretty much, and